Welcome back to another episode of the Color in Cannabis podcast. Today's episode, we have a good friend of mine, Amber Center. Super excited to have you here, Amber.
Yes, I'm happy and excited to be here. Can't wait for this conversation. I've been thinking a lot about this conversation. I'm like, oh, this is like me talking to my family. This is going to be a good time.
Yeah. I've known you for many, many years. It's got to be at least a decade now.
Yep.
And I've been really trying to plot this out since we talked about doing this. You've done so much in this space, so much in this industry. Just cramming it all in to this hour is going to be tough. But I'm just super excited you're here because you've done so many things in this space. You know how so many of the pieces kind of come together that I think it's going to be a great resource for a lot of people who are interested in what we're doing out here. Like I said, I met you over 10 years ago.
Yep.
Not when you first came to California, but you hadn't been here really that long. And I mean, I'm going to let you kind of really explain all the different things that you do. But I've always known you. I mean, originally I knew you as an amazing graphic designer, one of the best edible makers I've ever met. And then I go on to see you start so many other brands, flower brands, now your coffee brand. But I think I really got to know you when you and your crew started Supernova Women. There's an amazing organization. I'll let you kind of explain more about what that is. But just seeing your work in policy and actually product creation and then business development, helping clubs, worked at Magnolia and so many other clubs that you've advised and helped kind of businesses get off the ground. You've just had your toes in almost everything. So tell me a little bit about what brought you to California and all the different things you've been doing in cannabis.
Yeah, man, what brought me to California? Actually, it was my illness that brought me to California.
Okay.
So back in 2013, I was living in Chicago at the time. I had just moved back home from Atlanta, and I got really sick. And once we figured out what it was, which was lupus, I was like, oh man, I can't spend another winter here in California. I mean, in Chicago, because the winters in Chicago are relentless.
Yeah.
And so I put a post up on Facebook like, hey friends, I'm looking for a job in Atlanta as a creative director or art director or something like that. And someone from California, Mickey Martin, who I was friends with on Facebook, he sent me a DM and he's like, hey, if you go back to Atlanta, you're going to go to jail, right?
Typically direct, Mickey. Super direct.
He's like, you like weed too much. You're going to go to jail. You go back to Atlanta, which he had a good point. So he's like, why don't you come out here to Oakland and just check it out and maybe you'll like it and want to stay. So I said, okay. So maybe about 3 weeks later, I flew out here to check it out. He took me to all the places, Oaksterdam, took me to a grow, just kind of showing me around. And, I was enamored, I'm like, oh my God, this place is incredible.
Yeah.
And I moved here a month later.
Oh, that's amazing. That was a short turnaround.
Yeah,
awesome.
I didn't need a whole lot of convincing,
So when you originally came out, because I knew back home you were making edibles too, and you were growing, you've had your hands in everything, like I was saying. Yep. Did you come out to work with Mickey making edibles, or was it graphic design, or what was the thought when you first came out?
Yeah, so his thing was like, hey, we could really use your skill set out here. And it wasn't so much the edible making. Like, I knew how to make edibles. I was a grower. Like, I knew all those things prior to moving to California. Mm-hmm. But he's like, we could really use your branding and graphic design skill set here, especially for his company.
Yes.
So
which needed it.
Yeah.
He had great edibles, but we could work on the packaging.
Yeah. So I moved here and I was his sales and marketing person. Okay. And really just kind of overhauled all his packaging and the design and materials, his like the kits that we would drop off at the dispensaries with all his products. Like, I had just redesigned everything and put a bunch of processes and things like that in place. So it was cool. We went from 4 dispensaries when I got here to 50 in 6 months.
Wow.
So I was like, man, I was
crushing
really, yeah, I was hustling. Yeah.
I think a lot of people discount the importance of a good logo, good design. I mean, you want something that's going to capture the consumer's eye. And I know when we started Oakland Extracts, we were wrestling with like logos and designs and all that. And then you designed this amazing designed for us, which has really, it's opened up a lot of doors for us. And more importantly than just opening up doors, it's how our customers kind of know us over time. And so they're able to track us, that one brand with the crane on it. And then that visual really sticks in people's mind more than my story or even the name of the brand. Because at different points, people don't know if it's Oakland extracts or terps from the town, but they know that logo. And so I think the importance of branding is really underestimated. So your skill set in that is extraordinary. Like we have a lot of your products here, and I've just seen you generate logos or designs almost seemingly overnight. And so you're really, really brilliant at that. And it's interesting that you didn't just stay in that one lane, that you allowed yourself to grow into all these other spaces as well.
Yeah, it was pretty cool how all of this came together because, I went to school for mathematics and physics, but that was always just, I don't know, a thing. But but my passion has always been just design, period. Not even graphics, but just any kind of really design. Like I can design. People are like so surprised when they see my backyard because sometimes I'll post pictures of my backyard and they're like, oh my God, that looks like a professional did that. It's like, well, I'm a professional designer, not necessarily landscape, but I know how to make a space look nice, But I learned a lot of stuff from just my career and brand building and over, past 25 years. Like I've been helping big companies like Home Depot and Coca-Cola and a number of different companies develop their brands. And so, but while I was doing that, I was also like growing and learning how to make cannabis extracts and make hash and just do all these other things. So I was really excited to move here to put those skill sets together, like, sure, I learned a lot in corporate America, but I just felt like I had this really unique opportunity to take this really professional, background and skill set that I had and then just mesh it with so much I had learned on my own in cannabis and put them together. And it just was like a springboard for me when I came out here.
I know we did a lot here, but let's start actually back before you even moved out here. So you originally grew up in Chicago or Atlanta?
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago.
Okay. And where does your cannabis story begin? Like when did you start consuming? When did you start creating on your own? Like how did all that evolve, especially in a state where it wasn't so friendly to it?
Yeah. I really started smoking and consuming when I was 18. It was funny. I went to military school. And I was in there for like 10 months and I hated it and I left and I was only out for about 3 months and they did something they never do. My lieutenant called me and was like, hey, you actually were really good in the program. What would you think about coming back? Like they don't ever ask people to come back after you quit, but they asked me. So I said, okay. So I went back and enrolled back into the military. And then I stayed in there for several years. Mm-hmm. And during that break, that 3-month break is when I started smoking weed, right? And I after the first 2 times I didn't get high. And I think it was just because I didn't know how to inhale properly or smoke properly. But after that, I turned into a daily smoker, So when they asked me to come back, it was just like, oh, oops, yeah. But I went back, and it was a really interesting experience because I had realized how much cannabis helped me immediately, which is why I became a daily smoker, And
so it wasn't just for recreational benefits, you're feeling the medicinal benefits as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I had this issue where I would just get nauseous a lot for no reason, anxiety, whatever. And cannabis it's like I've never had that problem since I started smoking. And it was something that was such a big detrimental and debilitating thing for me. I was really worried as a kid, is this going to be my life? Less anxiety and nauseousness and throwing up all the time. Yeah. But it went away when I started smoking. So after that, and that also kind of just triggered some things for me in my mind. Well, they've been telling us that cannabis is bad for us and this has worked out so well for me and improved my quality of life. Like, what else are they lying to me about? And then this is 18-year-old Amber, with all these thoughts. But, so I got out of the military.
What was it like quitting to smoke and then being in the military after realizing, hey, this helps with nausea, this helps with all these medicinal ailments I'm having, but now I have to stop to be in the service? I guess it was more of even an immediate transition of realizing how much it was helpful, and then how was it not having it for years?
Yeah, it was difficult. Like, I quit for a while, and then I enrolled in college, and I went to an HBCU. Bethune-Cookman in Daytona Beach, Florida. So nice. it was impossible. Like, I'm at this black school and everybody smokes weed, So yeah, I mean, I smoked when I was in school.
Did that create a lot of stress with you being in the military? I mean, I know initially they P-test people a lot. Once you're all the way in, do they continue that?
Oh, yes.
So it was like a constant source of stress, worrying about being caught consuming.
It was a bit. Yeah, it definitely was. But I just somehow got real lucky.
And so when did your growing journey start? Did you start growing after the military? Or
that was well after the military, several years. I think I started around 2005.
Okay. Now, did you start growing before you made edibles, or like what was your progression into beyond consumer of actually engaging with the plant at a production level?
Yeah. So basically, I started growing in like a closet. It was like a wardrobe thing that I made, and then from there, you know how it goes. It's like once you start, you just can't stop.
Yeah, I need more space. And then
you start getting a little bit more money. You just reinvest it back into the grow, and so the grow kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'd be left over with all this really frosty trim and material, and I'm like, man, I don't want to throw this away. Like, I need to figure out how to use all this stuff. And so I bought a set of bubble Man's bubble bags, a 5-gallon kit.
Yeah.
And
great beginnings.
Yeah. And I learned how to make ice water extracts. And I was really active on the forums back then. There were message boards back then were like popping, especially for cannabis. And so I was just following all the great people. Scott Reach, he was going by Moonshine Man at that time. And I picked up a lot from all these people. It's so funny now because I learned so much from them. And now these are my peers in the industry, and it's like, man, you guys don't know how much you helped me, But
those message boards really changed the world.
They did.
Just disseminating that knowledge to everybody.
They did. IC Mag was, I mean, that was the one. That was international, and that and Overgrow. I was on those two. And so I taught myself from those message boards, and also Skunk Magazine, how to do all the stuff, how to grow, how to clone, how to germinate seeds, the whole process, hydro growing, soil growing, everything. And I just tried to really perfect my craft, and yeah, that's how I learned how to make extracts and all that. And then I had all these extracts, and what's really funny was I was living in Atlanta back then, and I was trying to sell all this, full melt, clear dome ice water hash. It was fire. Yeah. Like stupid fire. And nobody would buy it.
Yeah, it was like 2011, 2012 in Atlanta. Yeah, they didn't know what it was.
They didn't. I had the hardest time trying to sell ice water hash. So I'm like, all right, well, nobody's buying it. And I was ending up with like ounces. I just started making edibles.
Yeah, they'll buy that.
They did. Yeah. They bought that. So I was putting it in banana bread. I was putting it in ice cream. Like, I was just making all kinds of edibles. Yeah. And it was edibles that people just weren't making back then. Back then, everybody was doing brownies.
Yeah, cookies and brownies.
Yeah, and so I just changed the game and was just making all different kinds of edibles. And so that's...
I missed the popcorn. No comment. So how long were you doing that in Atlanta, before you actually moved out here?
Yeah, so I did that from, like 2005 until about 2011. I moved back to Chicago. around 2011, 2012. And then I moved here in February 2014.
Okay, it was after 2013. All right. So once you did get here and you started working with Mickey, did you immediately think, okay, now I'm going to start my own company from this? Or were you thinking initially, I'm just going to work for other folks? Like, how long was it between you working for him and you deciding, I need to start my own business, I need to go out on my own?
Yeah. So I worked for Mickey for maybe 7 months, like my first 7 months here. And anybody that's worked for Mickey knows.
Yeah. He's a lot. He's a lot. I love him. He was amazing, but he was a lot. He's a very strong personality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very strong personality.
Yeah. So, after a while, I was like, oh, well, let me go ahead and try making my own edibles and start my own company. So pretty much like 7 months after I got here, I was working for him. I started my own little edibles company, which was Leisure Life.
Yeah.
And I made an infused popcorn.
Yes, you did.
I made a Liege Belgian waffle.
Yes, you did.
And then I also made some cheese straws, like cheddar cheese straws. And I did that for maybe a year or so. And it was a good test, me testing, seeing what it's like having an edibles company in California. I had been doing this, obviously, in Atlanta for a long time. So actually being here and getting my product in dispensaries and running a brand and all that, that was an experience. I learned a lot.
That was around 2014, 2015?
Yep, 2014, 2015.
What were, back then, what did you see as the biggest hurdles in front of you toward developing a successful edible line and having out in the market?
Yeah, back then it was more just scaling, figuring out how to scale. Like, the money was not hard to make back then. It was pretty easy to make money and get your edibles out there, but having a consistent product, like having a potent product that was the right dose and scaling that up was a challenge, because back then it was like you had to find spaces to work in, and most spaces, especially for edible production, were just not available. So I was doing stuff like I was operating in a kitchen in Sonoma County, in the city of Sonoma, and I wouldn't be able to start making my edibles until like 10 p.m. And I'd work through the night. So that's what it was like back then. So there was challenges around that, right? Like, you got to find staff who's willing to work that late, and then just like you're making this product at night, you got to be all undercover, like. It was just, it had its own set of issues back then.
And I feel like edibles really never got easier, because they started having, once they did actually have structured rules about with Prop 64 about using kitchens and using labs, like you couldn't share a kitchen space with anyone period, much less a non-cannabis product. So finding a kitchen that's built for making production food, but then only allows cannabis brands in there and doesn't allow non-cannabis brands in there, and then you couldn't share a license either. So I don't really know how any of the small edible companies really survived at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It was very difficult then, even more difficult now. Yeah, but I did start that first shared social equity manufacturing facility because I saw all of the challenges over the years. And that was still a really difficult project. So it was basically, I started the first shared manufacturing facility for social equity operators in the country with grant funds from the city that the city got from the state for the social equity program. It was $250,000, ran it for 2 years. But it was really hard because it's still very capital intensive, not just for me being the primary licensee and overseeing all the other licensees under me, but they had capital problems too, because, them coming in there, having enough money to get licensing, insurance, packaging, just all of those things, plus the ingredients and resources and everything they need to produce their first 2 batches. That was like $50,000, and hey, it's not easy to come up with $50,000.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
And then basically do it as a side hustle.
Yeah.
because that's not going to be your full-time job.
No, not anytime soon.
Right. So you got to do that as a side hustle. And then you got to figure out how to move these products. And then you still have to have a full-time job.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like a lot of the regulations did not really consider real people, and did not look at implementation on how this actually would work out in someone's life. Like, how is this really practical? So, but that's the problem with regulations.
Absolutely. So how long was it in between the edibles before you started Supernova Women and got deep into policy? And actually, and what drove you into policy?
Yeah, so really, it was kind of around the same time. Like, I wasn't working for Mickey anymore. I was kind of doing my own thing. I met Nina Parks in February of 2015, actually on Valentine's Day, at a cannabis conference in San Francisco. And she and I started talking because we were the only two, aside from Issa Marie Perez and Ngayo Bloom. The four of us were the only black or brown people at this conference. And what's funny is Issa ended up being a Supernova board member too. But I met Nina there, and we started talking because we're like, hey, why are we the only black and brown people here? Like, this was 2015, very beginning of 2015, where cannabis is still very black and brown in California. But at this conference, a business conference, there was no black and brown people there. So that kind of like set a light bulb off in both of our heads, like, this don't feel right. Something's brewing. So after that, she and I continued to have conversations and just became friends. A few months later, I go to a Women Grow event, and Sunshine Lencho is at the check-in table, checking people in, checking tickets. And
Miss Sunshine.
Yeah.
She was amazing. It's an amazing person.
I have my dog with me, Max, my little miniature Dachshund. And she's like, oh, you have a miniature Dachshund. I have a miniature Dachshund too. And I said, oh, cool. And she introduced herself. And she asked me, hey, I'm looking for a job. Are you hiring? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't have a company, but the company I work for is hiring. She said, okay. And so I hooked her up, and she got a job at the same firm I was working at. By this time, I was working for a consulting firm. And when we were there working for this consulting firm, we were helping groups get cannabis business licenses. Now, these were medical licenses back then, because this is still 2015, in Maryland. This was their first round of licensing. Now, Sunshine's from Maryland, and all of the groups we were helping, there were 22 groups, and they were all white. And we had a problem with that, because if you know state of Maryland, it's very black.
There's a few of us out there, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, why are all these white people applying for licenses and no black people? And then why are we helping them? We had those questions.
Absolutely.
And so Sunshine and I started having conversations around that. So I'm having these two different conversations with these people, Nina over here, Sunshine over here, and I see some parallels between the two. And I think, a lot of overlap. And I'm like, okay, I need to get them together so that we can start talking together. And so I had a party in San Francisco at my friend's house, my friend Anthony's house. And I invited Sunshine and Nina, and we just started talking there. And like, hey, we've been having these conversations. We should set up a time to talk together and see how we can figure something out. And so Sunshine says, okay, well, let's have dinner at my house next week. So we had dinner at her house, and there was when we formed Supernova. And at the time, we were just thinking, all right, let's just do something so that we can let our communities know that this medical cannabis regulation is coming and what to expect just so that they can be prepared to transition over. And so that was in October of 2015. And then we put together our first event in downtown Oakland at Soul Space that you were on a panel. And that was in January of 2016. And that was really kind of like boom.
Yeah, that was super exciting. Up at that point, I had been to numerous cannabis events that were people were explaining just how to navigate regulations or kind of understand what the possibilities were out there. But like you're saying, it was very monochromatic, what it looked like, the people on the panels and the people in the audience. And knowing that our communities have had such intense relationships with the plant, to see us not actually involved in all of these things was very kind of depressing. So to go into your guys' event that was specifically speaking to our communities and see so many different black and brown and yellow men and women in this space learning about how they can navigate cannabis, it was really exciting. And I think for me, it was the first time that I really felt I saw my real place in this space, because otherwise you're in rooms where no one really looks like you, and there's assumptions about what you do and don't know and your competency and all that kind of stuff. So to actually be in a room where it's all of us just working together on that, it was a very powerful feeling. And I think it was one of the things that really made me believe in Oakland Extracts and believe in all the other things that we were working on, was seeing what you and Supernova were doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. That was like the first cannabis event that was put on for black and brown people by black and brown people.
I'd never seen or heard of anything like that before that, so it was really amazing.
Yeah. So that was a really powerful event. It was standing room only. And after that, we were like, okay, we're onto something here, and we need to do this again. So the next month, we did it in San Francisco, and it was kind of the same scenario. It was like standing room only, everybody's in there, packed out. Like, okay, so let's do this again, but let's do it in Boston. So the next month, we did it in Boston with Shalene Title. Same thing, packed out in the Roxbury, everybody comes, it's a success. And I'm like, all right, so we do it again the next month, this time in LA. And so all of this, we're having all this momentum, but at the same time, we're also showing up to city council meetings. We're bringing talking points for the community. We're urging city council to figure out a pathway for folks that have been harmed by the war on drugs to have a place in the regulated MAKR at the time. It was the medical cannabis regulations for California. And they're hearing everybody say the same thing. And so Desalie Brooks, and I think this was April of 2016, at a public safety meeting in Oakland, introduces a social equity program. This was like April 27th, I believe is when it was. Introduces the social equity program. So then around May 2nd, we get together, Supernova, with Alex Zavell.
Yeah, that's Alex.
We go to Lake Merritt. I bought some chicken wings from Lucky 37.
Yeah, that's our spot.
Yeah, it was Sunshine's birthday. Brought some Hennessy, brought a bunch of blunts. And we were smoking weed and we're hanging out together, and we come up with our first memo to the city of Oakland with all of these demands that are basically like the structure of the equity program. And we chop that up and we give it as talking points to everybody for the next city council meeting. Everybody says the same thing. And boom, we start to see this framework for the equity program come together.
That's amazing. So the need for the equity program is apparent, and a lot of different cities have equity programs, and they're all structured a little bit differently, and it seems like none of them are kind of really hit the mark from what you've seen, because as people who help design what the equity program should even look like, where do you see some of the pitfalls or how it's not working as effectively as it could in its implementation versus how it was originally pitched?
Yeah, equity programs get a lot of flack. And they're not perfect, but also they're built on a system that's complete trash, which is legalization, right? Like legalization doesn't work. So of course, all these little programs within legalization don't work, so that's always my kind of rebuttal or pushback when folks say, oh, equity's not working. It's like, is legalization working? Oh no, the industry's in shambles. It's like, well, Yeah. Industry's in shambles. Of course, the programs within it are going to be in shambles.
Absolutely.
You know, so like that's really just how I feel. Like if the industry were in a much better place and we had the same equity programs, they'd be doing 10,000 times better. Mm-hmm. You know,
what would you change, knowing that the industry is in a mess that can't be immediately fixed? How would you adapt or alter the existing equity programs to be more efficient or work better with the current system that we have?
Sure. It depends on, I guess, where we're at, where we're talking about, because each of them have their own kind of fundamental problems. Mm-hmm. Here in Oakland, the whole issue of not being able to sell your license as an equity operator is ridiculous. Like what, we're supposed to pass this down to our kids? Like, people got into this so that they can make some money and sell it.
Yep.
So that's trash. And that's really what a problem industry-wide, not just here in Oakland. San Francisco, the equity program is primarily for getting a dispensary, right? And now there's a moratorium, so ain't nobody opening up no shops anytime soon. But they make you secure your property, and this is also the case in a number of different jurisdictions around the country, make you secure your property when you apply for the license. Like, so
you got to pay rent day one long before you can even open.
Yeah, and you probably open in 3 years from day one. Yeah. All right, so that's a huge inequity issue. So there's some fundamental problems like that within the programs, and like I said, they're different across different municipalities, so each of them has their own little issue. I just heard in Minnesota, they've made the equity program available to all veterans. Like, if you're a veteran that served, you get to participate. And I think that's ridiculous. Like, that's not what this is set up for. Now, veterans that were using cannabis and got a dishonorable discharge because of it, got caught with it, whatever, they absolutely should be included because they're victims of the drug war. But if you're just someone that served, like I served, you know, we talked about that. I served in Coast Guard, but yeah, I shouldn't be eligible just because I served. That's crazy. Doesn't make any sense.
It does open up the field to a lot of people, and there definitely should be a path for veterans to be able to have access to getting in the industry. But there are veterans across the economic spectrum. And so just saying that any veteran has access to these limited funds for people is really just going to water it down by a lot of people who have a lot of money who can apply for these things but may not need it, as opposed to the vet or the POC person who actually legitimately does need it. So,
yeah. What if you're an admiral that's retired?
Yeah. Exactly. You probably don't need the help.
Right. And they're saying, all of the veterans make up 6% of Minnesota's population. So all of them are eligible?
Yeah, it's going to water down the program.
Absolutely. I mean, the program was already watered down anyway. It was just priority licensing. Like, who cares about that?
Is there any municipality you feel like is doing it substantially better than the other ones?
Oakland. Mm-hmm. That's it. The rest of them, I mean, there are some good ones. Long Beach has learned a lot from Oakland and really perfected things like the shared manufacturing facility and things like that. So Long Beach is doing a great job. Let's see where else is doing a great job. I mean, it's
few and far between. Are any other cities other than Oakland having any financial support? Because it's one thing to give someone access to a license, but if there isn't actual loans available, if there isn't financial support available, you can still do nothing. And I know Oakland sort of has. They have a program where they're supposedly giving out money, but are they actually doing it? And is anyone else doing anything like that?
Yeah, Oakland. The problem with Oakland is like they got a lot of issues, a lot of cities do, but Oakland has its own set of problems.
Yes, we do.
And so when they get the grant funds, the grant funds come in late. They're late issuing the grant funds. Oh, somebody hacked our system. We can't pay you. It's just a bunch of nonsense.
I mean, you can collect taxes, but yeah.
Exactly. But Oakland did just get $3 million. Mm-hmm. They got the same amount as LA, LA is much bigger.
Yes.
But they're not executing on their program as well as Oakland is. So that's why Oakland gets more money. So they're still getting the money and they're still issuing it, but I think it's a matter of competency and that what the state looks at when they're issuing these licenses and how far you've gone in really supporting entrepreneurs. And the folks in LA will get mad and say, we didn't get as much as Oakland. It's like, well, the city of LA is not doing a good job. And you need to hold them accountable,
Absolutely. I know as part of your policy work, you've been going to D.C. a lot for the past few years. What are some of the projects you've been working on in D.C. and how is that going?
Yeah, so we've been pushing the government really hard to deschedule cannabis. As everybody knows, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, the Health and Human Services Health and Human Services, which is part of the United States government, they recommended that cannabis be rescheduled to Schedule 3. And Schedule 3 is a category that includes ketamine, codeine, anabolic steroids, things like that. So it's still definitely a drug that's regulated, So we've basically been organizing over the past few months, urging the government, urging our colleagues and the community to ask the government to deschedule cannabis and completely remove it from the Controlled Substances Act, because as you know, it's Schedule 1 drug right now. But so yeah, I've been in DC basically just really advocating, talking to congressional folks, senators, representatives, all these different people, just trying to educate them on the reason why they should support descheduling instead of rescheduling. So many meetings, many Zoom calls. And then I went out to DC during the week of 4/20 to actually walk the halls of Congress, to talk to people, and just educate them on how this impacts Black and brown communities, how this impacts small business owners, the rescheduling versus descheduling. And, rescheduling, we'll see a bit more red tape. We'll see some complication, things slightly different, but really the average consumer won't see any difference. So, while people think this is a step in the right direction, it's really not. It's there's no movement here. Nothing changes. It's not legal. You still can't fly around with it. You still can't take it everywhere. You still can be criminalized for it. So yeah, it's the fact that it's still criminalized, which is a huge problem. Like, there's no reason to celebrate if people are still in jail and going to jail for
Absolutely.
weed.
Did you find the people in Congress receptive to what you're saying, or even knowledgeable about what you're talking to them about?
Yeah. I talked to a lot of Democrats, so they know what's going on. They're very tuned in and agree that cannabis should not be rescheduled but descheduled. So that was refreshing, but at the same time, that's not enough. Yeah. We need to get a lot of Republicans on board as well, and you would think that they would be supportive because this is really a state's issue.
Yeah, states' rights.
And this really affects small business owners, which is something that they claim to champion. So,
did you get any positive responses from conservative folks, or were they just kind of like, we don't want to hear about cannabis?
Yeah, a lot of them agree. And these are some ultra conservative people that are starting to see it as not so much of a criminal issue, but a public health issue, which is absolutely how they should be thinking about it. So, it was a very positive experience being in DC. Supernova presented Congresswoman Barbara Lee with a Lifetime Achievement Award, which was awesome. I spoke at a press conference in front of on Capitol Hill, which was dope. And we held a luncheon a day after our day of lobbying, where we invited Rosario Dawson and Congresswoman Omar, which was really cool. Supernova held a party out there, which a bunch of the advocates came to. And then we had a vigil in front of the White House, really just honoring all of the cannabis prisoners, that are still in jail.
Which is crazy that there's still so many people in jail for this, where there's so much commerce that's happening around this outside.
That's why this is just so blasphemous. It's like, wow, we're going to reschedule and still leave these people in jail and allow big cannabis companies to get a tax break and then do whatever they want. It's sickening.
Yeah, it is. Capitalism.
Yeah. So then after that, we had a National Cannabis Festival, and Wu-Tang performed, and it was a super dope week. Like it was incredible.
So how was the cannabis in DC?
I mean, there's nothing like California weed. We got our name for a reason.
Yes. I imagine I love trying things in different states, though, just to kind of get an idea of what they're excited about, what flavors they're interested in, and just seeing like community that erupts around particular strains or around particular favorites. I really like that.
Yeah.
So I know you traveled around the country doing work in policy work in cannabis. What are some of the other locales that you're most excited about? Like what's going on in Michigan, or what are some of the other places that you've been that you feel like are doing it well or doing interesting things that you're keeping an eye on?
At this point, it's more like who's really forward thinking and trying to push the industry forward. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's really out here. Okay. So like California, Oregon, Washington. Okay. And I named those three because we're going to be the three producer states, and we're trying to push forth interstate commerce, so that we can start selling to all the legal states across the country. So being like observing that work and being a part of that, that's like the next phase of cannabis. And that's really exciting because like I was just saying, California weed, like that's worldwide. That's world known. Everybody knows we're the best. And excited to have the potential to help all of these small businesses here on that next frontier and really help push their products out across the country. I mean, obviously we got a whole supply chain issue to look at and figure out from there, because damn near takes 2 months to get products here within the state on the shelves. Like how long is it going to take to get it on the shelves in New York? Yeah. I don't know. And
it's extremely an issue with perishable products. Mm-hmm. I mean, what we have when you make something, it's not going to last forever. So if your product is going to take 3 months to hit the market, well, in most of the cases in cannabis, it's not going to be a really good product anymore. So the importance of having a fast pipeline is really there. Yep. I know attitudes around equity have changed a lot. I feel like in the very beginning when it was first a conversation, I think people were kind of more open to it then than now in a lot of ways, because it sounded good. Okay, everyone should have more, certain people should have more access to it because people need access to it, and we know access was limited. But I feel like the conversation around the equity has kind of changed, and a lot of people who I would have thought would have been supportive in our industry of it kind of aren't anymore, or aren't as much, and are kind of already starting to be vocal against it. I won't mention any particular CEO, but there's a lot of people out there who are very vocal online about why equity doesn't work. How do you feel about the perception of equity? Has it gotten better or worse over time, or how do you see it changing, and where do you see it going in terms of these other people's perceptions? I know within our community we have a strong idea of the importance of it, but in terms of the outer communities, how are you seeing the response?
I mean, I'm in that whole space, so I don't really hear people talking crazy to me.
Yeah, not to you, not to your face. You certainly aren't going to say it to your face.
Yeah, but talking negatively about it. But like I said, if someone asks me, do I think they work? It's like, well, is the industry working? The industry is not working, so you can't put all the onus on the equity program.
Absolutely.
But and then to say that, oh, they don't work, we don't need them. It's like, well, they're not for you, so you actually don't have a say in any of this. You know what I mean? To say that someone who was harmed by the war on drugs shouldn't get priority in this industry, like, are you? Yeah. What are you smoking? Because it's not weed. So that's just, to me, that's like a non-negotiable. Yeah. Like how is this even a debate? Yeah. And if you think the program's not working, why would you say just get rid of it? Why wouldn't you try and figure out a way to improve it? I
think a lot of people forgot who they used to get their weed from. I think when people ask about this whole issue of like, why are certain groups being prioritized over others? I think certain groups were the focus on enforcement and punishment they were focused on. There's certain communities where just the smell of cannabis was the prelude to getting out of your car, disrupting your life. And it was so destructive in so many ways for certain communities that now, as we're in those communities, still have so many family members in jail behind this, that as this becomes a $1 billion business, we should recognize, and it's almost impossible to get started without significant financial backing, that we should look at the fact that the people who've been doing this for years, who helped spread this culture around, are now effectively boxed out because of the cost of getting involved in it and their legal situation. Because so many places in the beginning, if you had a bad legal record, then you couldn't get involved. And it's like, well, wait a minute.
That's how it still is in hemp.
Yes.
In the hemp industry, that's not even an intoxicating plant. Mm-hmm. Like, they've just proposed amendments just yesterday in the hemp bill, the farm bill, to allow folks with previous cannabis convictions to be growers and cultivators in hemp. Right.
A little late.
Right. Yeah. So like that's why we need equity programs, because otherwise people will be boxed out.
Absolutely. So you have a bunch of products on the market. I mean, obviously we have some of your infused pre-rolls, the Disco J's, some of your infused blunts, Tiger Eye. But I think what I'm most excited about is your adventures in coffee. Yeah. So which is a non-cannabis product. So how did you go from producing all these amazing cannabis products to venturing into coffee, and how's that going?
Yeah, so I always like to kind of introduce products that are just not your normal thing you'd see on the shelves, and that's just me pulling from my background, pulling from the culture of cannabis, looking at the landscape and just seeing what would be a cool, fun thing to do. Mm-hmm. So with the coffee, I was like, all right, there's this whole ritual between coffee and cannabis. Like, people get up in the morning, do a wake and bake, drink some coffee, and that's like call that a hippie speedball, And I just thought, like, man, how cool would it be to have this line of coffees that pair with different types of cannabis? And so that's what I did. My cousin is a coffee roaster in San Gabriel. And so I hooked up with him and was like, hey, I would really love to source coffee from small farmers around the world, particularly women-owned farms, and pair it with coffee. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And so we found some small women-owned farms, bought a bunch of green coffee beans from them. He's got a roastery. He roasts them. Boom.
Nice.
So, yeah. It's been a lot of fun, and we started doing these coffee and cannabis events.
That was the best thing. Just seeing the event, seeing the coffee set up with all the different strains so people can really see how they pair, how they taste, how they feel, that, and just seeing people that, I don't know, I feel like it brings in people who aren't the typical people
Absolutely.
that come to cannabis events. It's people who really just want to experience this other side of it, and it's really inspiring to see.
Yeah, and that was really also a big driver behind this brand. It was like, I'll be able to reach the coffee community and people that like coffee, not just people that like cannabis. And so when I started putting on the coffee and cannabis events, there was a lot of people there that I didn't even know. Mm-hmm. I had no idea who these people are. Yeah. and I loved that. Yeah. It's like, man, these are not cannabis industry people.
It's not the same faces that we see in everything that we do.
Yeah. We'd have packed out events. I didn't know more than half of the people. Mm-hmm. I got to learn who a lot of these people were because they became regulars at our events. But these were just people that like coffee. Yeah. And they just wanted to go, and they're like, oh, I heard about this through Visit Oakland. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to come and check it out and maybe smoke some weed. Yeah. And so we got tons and tons of people that are not cannabis connoisseurs. These are people that smoke sometimes. Mm-hmm. They love coffee, and just opened up a whole new world. Yeah.
I mean, I think it really stresses the importance of events. Because like, if you want to bring more people into this cannabis space, more customers, more education, events are a great way to do it. And especially events that just don't center around cannabis. Because then there's lots of people who are like cannabis curious or casual cannabis users that aren't going to spend their Saturday at a cannabis event, but they would go to a food event, or they go to a coffee event, or go to an art event. And if there happens to be cannabis there, they can see how it kind of plays with one plays well with the other, get some more kind of engaged in what we're doing. So I think events are critical, and you've always done a great job with your events.
Yeah, thank you. And really, like, when we look at what our relationship with cannabis has been like over the years, it's like, it's never really centered cannabis. Like, I mean, sure, the cannabis industry events center cannabis, but let's say you go to a party, you're kicking it with friends, you're going to go do something, like, cannabis is always just sprinkled on top, right? Like, that's just always a given. It's something that you're going to do, but there's usually another activity that's the focus, and it's not cannabis. And that's also what I really wanted to do with our event, was like, well, let's just have cannabis there and available, and pair it with the center, which is coffee and tea. Make sure we center that and educate people around that. But then it's like, hey, we have this cannabis that actually pairs with this kind of coffee. If you want to try it, you should try it. I think you might like it. Yeah. And that ended up being pretty successful.
I love seeing the reactions. I love it. It brought it was a much more eclectic group of people that came out.
Yeah.
It wasn't really our demographic, and just seeing all these people, and then people who didn't come for the cannabis that were brought by their friends, like, okay, I'll try a little bit. And then hearing their stories, I haven't smoked since 1969, or just something wild like that. It really warmed the heart to kind of see how it brings in the greater community at large and kind of gets everyone invested in what we're doing. It's really awesome.
Absolutely. And then we started even introducing other elements, like we brought up a company that sells houseplants. Mm-hmm. And they did a whole pop-up with houseplants. Or we also brought in a company that sells records. Mm-hmm. You know, so we had like
that was a great event with the vinyl and the dude out back with all the plants. I need to get his card again because he had the most amazing succulents, and it was just really great to see the communal thing happening.
Yep.
There's just a lot of people are trying different things, whether it be new events or trying to figure out ways to kind of expand how cannabis is interacting with the community. Are there other things that you see either on the horizon for you, or other things that people are working on that you're excited about that can kind of bring cannabis to the masses more? I know you guys did a movie night. That was really exciting.
Yeah.
We had the infused popcorn and non-infused popcorn at a movie night. That was great.
Yeah. So like events?
Yeah, or just events, or just new things that are developing in general that kind of have you excited about. Because I feel like we've been in our little cannabis bubble for so long, but when you do events like the coffee and you kind of invite these other groups, it really opens it up to a wider audience. And as you're traveling around the country, are you seeing other people who are kind of doing the same thing, creating events where it brings more people into the tent?
You know, it's hard to say about the other places around the country because, I mean, honestly, we're the innovators here. Yeah. Like, we're the ones that really kind of set the stage for what's to happen. So all the cool stuff that's happening is happening here. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but that's just how it is. I mean, we got cannabis hotels, bed and breakfasts. We have full-on restaurants out here. Like,
yeah, we're doing it.
We're doing it out here. Yeah. So, you know, the trends will continue east, but like, we're really the innovators here. So the stuff that I'm excited about here, you know, Pleasure Med down in West Hollywood. It's this new, like, really upscale, beautiful restaurant where you can consume cannabis. You know, like, I'm excited about the tourism aspect behind it. You know, like, I'm somebody that likes to show people a good time. Yeah. And all of that stuff just, like, really, I mean, it gives me goosebumps. It gets me so excited. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So who, I asked this is a question for everybody, but who in your family has really inspired you with this entrepreneurial spirit, or who's really, like a lot of folks, their grandmother, their grandparents, or who in your family tree really kind of pushed you out there to be willing to take these risks and go out into this space and do what you're doing? Oh
yeah, it was definitely my grandfather. Like, he was the entrepreneur's entrepreneur, you know, and he was somebody who was very invested in the community and supportive of his community. So, you know, I remember being a little girl going to his office in downtown Waukegan, which is a town over from where I grew up. But, I mean, he hired all walks of life at his company. It was poor people. It was people with mental illness. It was black people, well, all black people. And these folks would be seen as undesirable for other people, for other companies or whatever. But those were the people that he hired and gave them jobs. And, he was awesome.
Yeah.
He had a 4th grade education. He was a sharecropper. He left Mississippi in 1946 and moved during the Great Migration from Coldwater, Mississippi to Chicago. And really created this whole ecosystem for my family and many other Black families to survive and have jobs, and that paid well. He was featured in Black Enterprise 4 times.
Nice.
And it's my granddad, so I was so inspired by him at such a young age. I just really wanted to, just make my family proud.
How does your family feel about your involvement in cannabis?
They love it. Initially it was not that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when I was hustling in Atlanta. They did not like that. They ain't like that at all. But, and they're really supportive now. They've seen how cannabis has changed my life, how it's improved my life, and they see what I do for others. And they're incredibly supportive.
That's beautiful. So I really want to let people know how they can support you. I know if you're not in California, it's harder to access the cannabis products, but I know your coffee is available on your website. So how can they find your coffee?
Yeah, definitely. Landraceorigins.com. We've got a number of different coffees. We just introduced teas like a good 6-7 months ago. So we have a huge variety of teas, actually more teas than we have coffee.
Excellent.
Yes. Landraceorigins.com. We can ship across the United States.
Excellent. And for the actual cannabis products, if folks who are in California who want to find out how to access your cannabis products, what is your socials for your cannabis brand? Yes.
You can go to Disco J's on Instagram. It's disco.j's. Tiger's Eye Magars on Instagram. And of course, if you want to follow Supernova, Supernova Women on Instagram as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming today. Super excited to have you here. Look forward to having you again so we can keep up with all the amazing work that you're doing. But it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Taryn.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.